Today we are going to be talking about feudalism, as well as peasants, trade, and cities. First of all, what we see is Charlemagne, the leader of the Carolingian Empire, is going to die in 814, and as you can imagine, we're going to see similar effects of what we've seen in the past with other empires. After he dies, we see that the Carolingian Empire is divided. Then we also see that a leader is appointed for each part of the kingdom, and the different rulers begin to compete for power. Then what we see is, due to the death of the strong leader that served as the unifying force, and due to the division between leaders competing for power, the former Carolingian Empire is easily defeated by invaders. So the division and the invasion are going to lead to the end of the Carolingian Empire. And what we're going to see is this is going to mean the end of a strong central government that protects the people. And so the people are going to need that protection. This is where feudalism comes in. Feudalism is the political as well as the social order that arises to protect the people. And in terms of that word social, it's related to how society is organized. What we see is that the king is going to give land to the lords. The lords are going to hire knights in order to protect the land. And then peasants and serfs are going to be hired to farm the land. And in a moment, we'll talk about the difference between a peasant and a serf. So think about our castle simulation. You appointed a lord. You did the coat of arms to represent the knight. And then you also had to complete the farming tasks. So here's a diagram to help you think about how it is. So the king is appoints the lord to handle the territory, and then the lord appoints the knight to protect, and then the serf is appointed to work the land. And then, as I mentioned in the simulation, they had to pay very high taxes. Oftentimes they were so high it was more like slave labor. Our next section we're going to look at is Peasants, Trade, and Cities. This is Chapter 10, Section 1. And we're going to talk about the manorial system. So the manorial system is going to be the economic system of the Middle Ages. So feudalism was the political and the social. The manorial system is going to be the economic system. A manor is going to be an agricultural estate that a lord ran and peasants worked. On the manor, you're going to see it's basically a self-sustaining area. There's going to be a church, the lord's house, farmland. You'll see a place for the blacksmith, things like that. And what we see is the manorial system actually led to an increase in the number of serfs. So a serf, this is how they're different from a peasant. A serf is going to be someone that's legally bound to the land. They're going to have much less freedom than a peasant. So for example, a serf had to ask for permission to leave the manor. They also had to ask the lord permission to marry someone else from another manor. And a peasant is going to be different. They can come and go as they please. They can marry who they would like. And serfs are going to provide labor services to the lord. They're going to pay rent to the lord, and they're going to give a share of the food they grow to the lord. Here in a minute, we're going to look at a diagram. So here's an example of a medieval manor. We see this is going to be common land. As I mentioned, a portion of what they grew went to the lord. So we can see based on the key that this reddish orange is food that they grew for the lord. We see the village, we see the church, the priest's home, the mill where they're going to grind the wheat into bread, the bakehouse where they're going to make it into bread, the blacksmith that will make the iron tools, the barn, there's the house. So here's an example. You're also welcome to click on this diagram, and it's just another more detailed diagram of what a manor looked like. Next, what we're going to see is there are some advances in agricultural practices. So the first thing is that we see that iron is used in farming tools, and one of the tools that is made of iron is the carruca, which is a plow, and this is going to be really significant to have an iron plow because it's going to make it easier to to plow more land. So plowing is what you do when you turn the soil to prepare the soil for planting. And then it's also going to let them plow rocky clay soil. So something that was very difficult before, they are able to plow it now. Something else that we're going to see is that they're going to rotate crops. So for example, they would leave, let's say there were 3 fields. They might only plant 2 of the 3 fields at a time and allow 1 field to remain fallow or unplanted to allow that soil to regain its nutrients, and then they would do a rotation, and then they'd plant in that one and another field and allow another field to remain fallow. So by rotating the crops, it's going to leave the soil fertile, and it's going to lead to an increase in food and lead to surpluses. So surpluses, more food than they need. So some other effects of having better farming tools and rotating crops, we see that less farmers are needed to produce more food. And so with farmers out of a job, they're going to head to cities in order to pursue other jobs, and this is going to mean that we see cities growing. Next, what we see is an emphasis on trade. So specifically, we're going to see cities in Italy are going to be these centers of trade, and we're going to revisit this when we're looking at the Renaissance as well. So some effects of this revival of trade. The first is we see the rise of a money economy. This is a type of system where goods are purchased with currency, so meaning coins or paper money, instead of bartering, meaning instead of trading one good for another good. Second, we see the rise of commercial capitalism. So this is when people are going to invest in trade or invest in a specific good, like maybe textiles, so textiles being cloth, in order to make a profit. Then what we see is cities and towns will become important centers to manufacture goods. So some goods that were manufactured include cloth, metalwork, shoes, leather goods. And then lastly, this is a very important term that you need to make sure that you underline, highlight, circle. Craftspeople will begin to organize guilds. Guild is the word that I want you to focus on. So a guild is a business association. These are going to be formed for almost every craft. So for example, if a blacksmith or people that produce textiles or people that produce leather goods, etc. And the guild is going to determine, they're going to determine if a good is made up to a particular quality. They're going to establish what methods are going to be used to make the good. They're going to say how much it should be sold for. And then they're going to determine if a person can enter that trade. So for example, they would determine if a person could become a blacksmith. And that is the end of the lesson. Tomorrow we will be looking at the different roles in feudalism, and don't forget to write your summary.